Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would like to continue our discussion of the works that can be found in the Criterion Collection released set, which is Eric Rohmer's 6 Moral Tales. And the set is right here in the Blu-ray form. And today I would like to speak in particular about that film which is given spine number 346 in the Criterion Collection. This is from 1967. This is the 4th film in the sequence of 6 Moral Tales. And this is the film which is called La Collectionneuse. Although this film was made in 1967 and My Night at Maud's was made in 1969, please note again that La Collectionneuse, though made earlier, is deemed to be the film that falls later in the order of the cycle of films in the 6 Moral Tales, while My Night at Maud's, or Ma Nuit chez Maud, is deemed to be the 3rd film, although it was made later. So the order of the production of those films is reversed, but for sake of the ordering in the cycle of the 6 Moral Tales, Ma Nuit chez Maud, or My Night at Maud's, comes first, and then as the 3rd film, and then the 4th film that follows is La Collectionneuse, although once again it was made prior. La Collectionneuse is the film that is a very interesting and curious one, and once again further propels and examines and explores and builds upon the themes that we have seen thus far in the work's 6 Moral Tales. I should point out that in terms of the ordering and structuring of this film in the context of the 6 films themselves, we have for the first time a film that is in color. And to be specific, since this was earlier, 1967, this is a feature-length film. So in terms of the production history order, this is the first time we are getting a feature-length film in the 6 Moral Tales. Again, even though it is deemed to be the 4th film in the cycle of films. But the point I wanted to bring up is the first 3 films were in black and white. And now we have the 4th film in color, and we shall see that the latter half of the 6 Moral Tales, these latter 3 films, the final 3 films, the 4th film, the 5th film, and the 6th film, La Collectionneuse and Claire's Knee, and Love in the Afternoon. So those final 3 films will all be in color, and so this is a kind of structural. Visually structural sort of formalism that is applied here, and so we should just keep that in mind. And also we should note here once again the work of Nestor Almendros and his photography. And if you're interested in the Criterion Collection, just in case you're interested, there is a booklet, a little booklet, the essays, which includes an essay by Nestor Almendros. And so in case you're interested, please take a look at that. As for the film itself, in general terms, we should point out also that we have yet again a male narrator or male character that is at the focus or center of the film. This is the character of Adrien, and he is surrounded by 2 other characters that form a kind of thematic unit or another narrative triangle, if you will. There are other characters that come in and out, of course, but in terms of a main core of character dynamics that are presented in the film, we have Adrien at the center, and then we have Daniel, who is another man, and then we have Aidé, who is the young woman. And so therefore we have yet another character dynamic that is composed of two men and one woman. And we have seen this kind of dynamic play out in previous films, or in one film in particular, which is Suzanne's Career, or La Carrière de Suzanne. And so that is not the only kind of similarity that we can draw, of course, with Suzanne's career, and I'll get to that in a second. But just keep in mind that, once again, although there are many other characters, many other peripheral or secondary characters that do come in and out, please note that there is this general trio of characters. But once again, there are other characters. In particular, there are other men characters that emerge, and there is also another female character that emerges that is very relevant to the life of Adrienne in particular. And there are other male characters that emerge as well that are very relevant to the female character here of Aidé. And so, but the three characters here are the characters that are more or less focused on in this film, and also in the written text as well that was written by Rohmer. Do we have similar themes that we saw in the other trio film with two men and one woman that we saw in Suzanne's Career? Because as I just mentioned, that was the other film where we saw two men and one woman primarily as the focus of that film. Are there similar dynamics going on in terms of jealousy, what might also be deemed or interpreted to be a kind of sexual jealousy? Are there shifting dynamics between men and women? Are there attempts at manipulation? Are there attempts at trying to rationalize acts and thoughts of manipulation and superiority? Are there projections of superiority against other people whom certain characters, the male characters in particular, consider or deem to be quote-unquote inferior, emotionally inferior or emotionally immature, etc., etc.? And I think the answer when we look at La Collectionneuse is a strong and resounding yes. We see in this film very similar themes play out. It is a different setting, and this is set in Saint-Tropez, and so we're not in Paris or Paris anymore. And so there are differences. There are differences in terms of setting. This is also a color film. This is also a slightly longer film, and we do have characters that, the male characters in particular, that could be described to be slightly older, not by much, but maybe by a few years, slightly older than the characters that we saw in Suzanne's Career or La Carrière de Suzanne. But for the most part also, as I was trying to suggest now, there are many similarities in that in La Collectionneuse we are dealing with subjectivity and objectivity again. The male viewpoint or the male perspective is on full display and objectifying the things around him, and he's objectifying things in terms of art pieces and works of art, but he's also objectifying the people around him, and also in particular the woman that is at the center of this film, Aidé. And Aidé is very much objectified. She is looked upon in terms of her physical appearance, in terms of the way in which men in the film are attracted to her. And the camera also gazes upon her as these dialogues continue, or as these monologues continue, or even where there are no monologues. Please note the very introduction of Aidé in the film involves no words, involves no dialogues with others. It's just a shot of her walking along the beach, wearing, a bikini, and so it is revealing certain parts of her body. And so this too can be said to almost be an extension, if you will, of the objectification of Ede in particular, and perhaps also of the women that we have seen portrayed in not just this film, but also the Six Moral Tales in particular. And so we have to always keep that in mind. What is the degree to which the characters in this film and the filmmakers in this film, by extension, are engaging in objectification of women? And does that objectification tend towards a misogynistic degree? And so we as viewers always have to keep this in mind. And when we think about it in the context of a film like Suzanne's career, or the possibility of that in a film like Suzanne's career, we always have to remember, of course, that the plot in that film and the way in which certain gender-based character dynamics, in other words, the character dynamic between the men and the women, and in particular the main character narrator and Suzanne of that film, there was a very considerable shift in that in terms of a power dynamic. And so I think in that sense it could be said that perhaps the objectification turned itself on its own head and surprised the narrator. Well, I think in this film, La Collectionneuse, there is arguably a similar thing that is going on in terms of the way in which the narrator here, or the main character here, Adrien, is really looking on the people here, and he's really thinking about the people in terms of manipulation, in terms of an almost cynical manipulation of people and events in order to satisfy what? Satisfy some kind of subjectively imposed rationalization, or some kind of subjectively opposed moral code, or maybe it's a way of trying to avoid making decisions in his own life. So it's another way of expressing the main character's own sense of indecision, whether that indecision can be further extended or interpreted as being a kind of impotence. Impotence is something that one should also consider when watching this film. But in any event, there is this degree of manipulation and a kind of emotional manipulation that is related to sexual relations and sexual relationships, and how this give and take between the emotional side and the sexual side does give way to further complications and in relationships, and perhaps potential damaging of relationships as well. But all throughout this, we see attempts by the main character to try, in a sense, to rationalize this, or to try to give a sense of order, sort of a morality-based order to the types of things that we see him doing. And then when we pursue the story further, and we see the further attempts at rationalization, indecision, subjectivity and objectivity, and objects, and the way in which men and women, or the way in which, well, I was going to say the way in which men and women relate to each other, but I think a better way, a more accurate way to put it, is how men perceive themselves vis-a-vis their interaction with women. And so this is, as I say, another male perspective on these sorts of themes, and this is true throughout the entirety of the Six Moral Tales. Don't get me wrong. I don't think either Eric Romero or anyone else tries to make a claim that this is anything other than a male perspective from different male characters vis-a-vis, as I say, objects that are these female characters, and this is true for the entirety of the sequence. or the cycle of films. And so I don't think anyone is denying that. We as viewers have to keep that in mind whenever we watch this or any film. But if we are to look at this film in terms of the merits of the film itself, which is what I'm trying to suggest, then I think we can also see that this development of these themes, I think, does turn into it does turn in certain surprising ways narratively, thus creating this sense that we might have seen also in Cézanne's career of a turning of the tables, if you will, an emotional manipulation that is upended, a kind of sexual dynamic that is thwarted, if you will, in favor of someone other than the male narrator character. And even though we might have had certain sympathies with the male narrator character, perhaps, or we might have had certain sympathies with other characters in the film, there is still, of course, this sense of ambiguity, and there is still a sense of wondering whether indeed the male narrator, the male main character, Adrien, is indeed really abiding by an earnest and good faith attempt at a moral code, or is there something more cynical and perhaps even more sinister going on? Who knows? But in any event, we do see certain attempts at manipulation thwarted, upended. The dynamic, the sexual dynamic, the gender dynamic, the character dynamic seem to be shifting very much so, to the point where we can see similar parallels again with Cézanne's career, or La Carrière de Cézanne, or this notion of who really wins in the end, if in this case of this notion of shifting gender dynamics, who really won in this film. And I think when we really think about that and really consider that and give further thought to that, then I think we can find that the perspective of the male perspective given in this film, that was prone to a kind of subjectivity, objectivity, that was prone to trying to consider other people in terms of objects, perhaps, might have seen the tables turned on him. And so I think that is something to keep in mind when we as viewers consider this particular work, and consider it in terms of the morality of the character and the morality, in air quotes, of the film itself. And therefore I think it is a very fascinating and quite engaging and very thought-provoking work. It is not simple. It is very complex, and it is very complex because the dynamics tend to shift almost imperceptibly, almost on a dime, and so we have to really just be really wary as we're watching it, as we're watching little clues in the way the dialogue turns out, and the way in the little things that we hear, and we have to really be just paying attention to as many of the little details as possible, just to see if we can get any clues as to the way in which this kind of structure, if you will, is upended, shifted, turned upside down, and reversed, or something of that nature, because that is going on here as well, and that really applies a lot of complexity or complex nature to the way in which the male perspective is portrayed in this film, thus making, I think, for very fascinating cinema in this work, which the title of which is La Collectionneuse. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and I hope that you are well. So please, my friends, please continue to take very good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next Eric Rohmer 6 Moral Tales video, which is Claire's Knee. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much again for your time, my friends, and cheers.